your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.
Hey, good evening, horror fans. Welcome to another edition of the Weekly Horoscope. I'm your host, Jerry, here with my partner, Matt. And Matt, this week we are looking at Massacre at the Mall. And well, this is kind of a silly category title. You know, the one thing I thought about is malls are a place of community and a place of gathering. And, you know, even though in this day and age, you know, you hear about mass shootings and there's horror wherever we go, typically you think of a mall as a place of relaxation and shopping and food and nothing negative. And I always like when we take regular situations where you're comfortable and normal and relaxed, and then we subject them to horrific and strange elements. What do you think of this category?
Yeah, I agree. It's a really fun trope to play with. Malls are like you said. There's something youthful about them where people kind of just go and enjoy themselves, and there's also this metaphor to like Western consumption, and I feel like they became very popular after World War II with the spread of wealth in this country into the suburbs, where people in the suburbs wanted that city experience, but because they're in the suburbs, they couldn't get it. So they just put all of the consumable things in a mall, and people could just walk around and get that city, experienced all within like a suburban mall. And so they kind of popped up throughout the country over the decades. And it became this Western consumption metaphor. So watching these movies have fun with that in a horrific sense, where they almost bring about this like decay of society element to it. It's really fun to watch what they do with it.
Absolutely. And of course, the first movie when we discussed this category, the first movie that jumped into my head and probably the most famous of the mall horror movies is our first movie we're going to talk about, and it's Dawn of the Dead from 1978, directed by George A. Romero. And this movie is generally considered one of the, if not the finest zombie movie historically. If you look at critics' lists and dozens and dozens of lists list this as the top zombie movie. And I've always been a huge fan of it. I think it's top 10 horror movie of all time, in my opinion. The only thing I would say is 45 years later, the effects, the coloring of the blood and some of the facial coloring where the zombies are kind of bluish. And you look at a show like The Walking Dead and what they did with the advancement in the makeup, etc. The only thing about this movie is the makeup does look a little dated.
Yeah, I had watched this movie when I was younger, the original color version, and then for watching it again for this episode, I watched it in black and white. I didn't even know there was a black and white version, but I found one, and I think it gave a different perspective on the movie for me. It didn't make it feel as dated. It actually felt more modern. It felt like you were able to kind of just concentrate on the acting and the drama. And you kind of just like it's created this kind of separation of the cheesiness or the outdatedness of some of the special effects because they didn't seem as bad with black and white.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I didn't know that existed either. And in fact, in the Tom Savini documentary, he mentions that he didn't yet have the right formula for blood. And I think he got the formula from Dick Smith. And it's a little too red and a little too bright. And it is kind of shocking and takes you out of some of the moments, but not to diminish this is a classic movie because it definitely is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even still the stuff that he was doing with the special effects, like the ripping the guts out and everything, the biting the neck and taking the chunks out. I mean, it still felt like ahead of its time. It had that Tom Savini touch.
Yeah. And that's kind of when you push the envelope and you try to do something in a way people haven't done before, you're always subjected to looking back and it being, less, but no one had done anything quite like it at this point. So
it's the stepping
trailblazing.
Stone. Right.
Our story starts at a news station where they are reporting the zombie plague is spreading, and it's kind of a direct continuation of Night of the Living Dead, but we've moved from the plague in a small rural community to cities with worldwide implications. And we understand this isn't an isolated, farmhouse on a hill. This is a worldwide plague that could have huge ramifications.
Yeah, this opening scene, it really does a great job of like setting the tone for almost like the panic of like a pandemic. Like these people are like having like a vicious argument, and you can hear people in the background kind of shouting, and it's almost like the beginning of the panic, where you can just like hear like people are trying to maintain rationality in the conversation, but everything's just overheated, and it actually does a great job setting the tone right away.
I looked at it and I wrote that the station is unraveling with chaos as a
Yeah.
microcosm of the world it's projecting, and the viewers it's projecting too. It's a
Yes.
perfect small world, example of everything that's going wrong.
Perfectly stated.
The one thing I thought was cool, the scientists are debating, and this has kind of become a standard thing. And if you look at the opening episode of The Last of Us, they start with a throwback of scientists on a news show debating the possibility of the virus or plague that's in that world, and it's almost a direct copy of this here. And I think this movie just set so many standards that people followed for years to come.
Yeah, and in so many different movies too. Like there was even in Cloverfield, like 10 Cloverfield Lane, you can even see pockets of that with the isolation, and like it's not not directly, but you can see like how it had some of the influence and like some of the tone that they created in this movie. And like you said, like The Last of Us. And
Yeah. We cut to the police are storming an apartment building, and there's some stereotypical overzealous cops who's making racial comments and can't wait to start shooting people, pretty over the top, unrealistic, or hopefully unrealistic. But some of the citizens decide they're going to fight back, and the shooting commences, and we see, regular people are getting mowed down by the police. And we finally get inside the building, and there's families degenerating. There's people with, grandpa on the floor, and he's coming back to life. And we get this microcosm of the world unraveling. It's really well done.
Yeah, and again with that cop, like you almost like that scene. It's almost like it's creating like these types of situations just bring out like the worst in people, and it just kind of breeds hatred and sickness. Like it's not just the zombies that are bad; it's the people that are becoming worse type of people. You see that with like the looters and the ravengers, and it's just a total decay.
Yeah, we've seen that with zombie movies and apocalyptic movies ever since. That sometimes the greatest threat is the human threat, not the zombies.
Right.
We find there's a weird scene, kind of a cool scene, where a preacher in the basement is keeping all the zombies holed up, and they're in like one big room, and they're just in blanket. It's almost like a refugee camp, and it's very weirdly done. But you see them in blankets, and they're starting to rise, and it's just a room full of zombies, and they start shooting them and picking them off. And our two cops that we meet in the basement are Roger and Peter, and they decide that this is all falling apart, and they're going to get out of here.
Yeah.
And Roger's got a friend who's a pilot, so Roger and Peter join the pilot Stephen and his girlfriend Franny. Franny works at the news station, and they're flying out of the city. So they're taking off.
Yeah, they have access to the police station, the news station helicopter.
Yeah, and the thing is, they don't necessarily. They talk about going to Canada. They want out, but they don't know where they're really going. They don't have a solid plan.
Which I kind of like that. It's kind of realistic. There's not like there's some dispatch out there. Like, if you're out there, just come here. Like you see a lot in movies, like they're like, we just got to go.
We just got to get out of here.
Yeah.
I would like a plan myself. I'd like a little bit better plan. I always thought, I'm going to head for an island, easier to defend, easier to shore up. But that's just me.
They say that the other group of cops that are leaving, they say that, don't they? They say that we're going to get and go to an island. He's like, which one? He's like, any one of them. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Like they're getting in boats. Yeah.
And it's a theme that George Romero explores in his last film. I think it's called Survival of the Dead. And it is exactly that. A community is resettled on an island to some form of normalcy until, of course, things go wrong. But yeah, it's definitely a theme you could
He
dive
plays
a
with
lot
that
deeper.
theme later. Yeah, you could tell he danced around a lot of these ideas.
Absolutely. So they head out and we see them flying over rural Pennsylvania, and we see some of the hunting parties and the redneck games that kind of mirror what took place at the end of Night of the Living Dead, kind of tying it all together here as the same world.
Yeah, yeah, it's within the same universe.
They have to stop for fuel. They stop at a little middle of nowhere airstrip, and while they're fueling, they encounter several zombies there, including kind of an infamous head chop zombie. When you first are introduced to this character, he has an extremely elongated head, and you find out why as he climbs up on a box, and the blades of the helicopter just take layers off of his elongated head, which was still
Yeah,
kind of cool.
yeah,
But one thing I thought was really interesting is there's where they encounter a couple zombie kids,
yeah, yeah.
and
They do that a couple times in the movie where it's like they have to shoot the zombie kids, because that's not something you really typically think about, or it's not usually done a lot in zombie movies or shows. But you're gonna have a lot of like 3-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds that are just zombies, and you're gonna have to make that choice.
and it's a boy and a girl, and I immediately thought back to the first episode of The Walking Dead, where Rick Grimes encounters a young girl and is forced to shoot her and put her down. And I thought it almost think the girl looked just like this little girl that's in this movie. And I think of the influence that this carried for decades to come.
If you're gonna make a zombie movie, you kind of have to pay homage to this Dawn of the Dead in some way, even if it's for one scene. You couldn't even help it.
Yeah. Yeah. So they get back in the helicopter. Everybody gets away safe, and they see a mall, and they decide to check it out. And they land on the roof, and they find access to a storage area that seems to be cut off from the rest of the mall. And they realize they could be sitting on a gold mine for supplies.
Yeah.
And Roger and Peter, the two cops, make it into a department store, and they start grabbing stuff. And Steven tries to follow them, but he's not adept at killing where they are. He gets himself into a couple precarious situations where you don't think he's going to make it.
Yeah.
And he finally makes it, and they're all in the department store, and they find an air duct that they can safely travel through. While they're doing all this, one zombie makes its way up to Franny, who we find out is pregnant, but the men arrive back in time to save her. Now, in that scene, I thought Franny comes off as, and you're just finding out she's pregnant, but she comes off as very weak and helpless, which I guess I just thought the female representation could have been a little stronger. But of course, this is all brand new, so I guess she does gain strength as we go on in the movie. So maybe it's excused, but my first feeling was, wow, they just really made her look so weak.
Yeah. There's good character development in this movie, whether it's for the good or for the bad. Like you see certain characters like change over the course of this movie. I thought they did that well.
They decide that they can clean out the mall, even though there's dozens to hundreds of zombies that we can see just wandering around aimlessly. Some funny scenes where they power up and they're stuck on the escalator and they're like spinning around, not knowing what to do.
Yeah, they're kind of just walking around like spinning like goofily, and like a lot of these zombies aren't exactly like they're not like the super CGI decayed ones. They're kind of like almost just people, and then maybe they might have a laceration here or there, but for the most part, a lot of them just like they just turned.
Yeah. You get the blue tone of the skin, of course, not in black and white, but
it
gives the impression that they are very recently deceased. But you don't see, and my wife actually commented on that, like, why are these people dead? You don't see where they were bit or injuries or gunshots or anything. They just, and they're not dirty, like they just climbed out of a grave.
A grave, yeah. So.
But there's an interesting part here, I thought, and I think it speaks to kind of the messaging that Romero always puts in his films. But the Franny asks, "What are they?" And Peter says, "They're us."
Yeah.
And I think that kind of, he speaks on, materialism and consumerism and kind of the
Yeah.
blind sheep mentality, and that sums it up perfectly in that scene, I thought.
Yeah, he says that when there's no room left in hell, they'll just wander the earth, and they're just us, like you said. It was a really cool scene. He had some good lines in there.
That's one of the greatest taglines, I think,
Yeah.
of any movie. When there's no room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's just fantastic.
Yeah, I really liked it because the whole time he just has this like stoic dystopian feel, like this can't be any more serious. He's not cracking any jokes. He's just like, this is it. Like we've got nothing left to do but try and survive for like another hour.
Yeah.
And like every movement he takes, it's like, all right, lock that door, secure this, and like he's just focused in on it. But it's like a sense of dread. Like it doesn't even seem like he thinks they're going to survive. He's just trying to do what they can.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of doom and gloom, certainly. But there is some positives as they cycle through this process. They decide that they can clean out the mall, but they first must block the doors. And from the roof, they can see a small, trucks down the road, like tractor trailer trucks,
Mhm.
and they decide they're going to block the doors. So they shuttle back and forth with Roger and Peter driving the trucks and Steven watching from the chopper. And at this point, Roger's getting real cocky and careless and real cowboyish with the
Yep.
zombies. And at one point, Peter grabs him and tells him to get it together. And sure enough, on the last truck, Roger gets bit on the arm and the leg, and we know he's doomed.
Yep. Yeah, it's only a matter of time. And yeah, he was getting vicious. Like he was just just like you said, just kind of getting out of control and kind of losing his character. Like he was kind of like folding in with rage, where he wasn't being as like centered. He was kind of getting the best of him, like you said, and it just caused him to get careless and ultimately, get himself killed.
Yeah. And he doesn't die right away. He actually comes back with him, and he's still helping him at this point. They go to a gun store for a supply run, and then pushing Roger in a hand cart, they all go to the department store together. And their goal is they're going to distract the zombies so they can go lock the outer doors. The doors are now blocked with the tractor trailers. So if they can lock the outer doors, it'll prevent enough zombies from building up to push in the doors. That was their theory. So Franny suggests, why don't you use one of the cars that's parked in the mall? So they get in one of the cars, and Roger actually is driving, and they drive around from the sets of doors to sets of doors, and they get them all locked. So with the mall completely secured, they set out to kill all the zombies inside. And there's, like I say, there's hundreds.
Yeah, yeah. And originally it just started off like X amount, but like it seems like they just keep coming. And he brings up at one point, it was Roger, I believe, brings up they're just going to keep coming because this is what they're attracted to. Like even in their zombie death state, this is what they know. Like this is a part of their memory still lives on, where they know that they have to do this. And it's almost like that Western consumption capitalist metaphor that they're bringing up again.
Yeah. Who's the real zombies? If they're just walking around because that's what they remember to do.
I almost wonder if Romero did actually was the first one to create this metaphor.
Seems like he created the genre.
Yeah, you could say that.
They put the bodies into a freezer. One thing I'm amazed at in these movies, the two movies we're going to cover, is the stores that exist in these malls. They load up. There's a gun store. There's a a guns and ammo store.
Yeah.
There happens to be a full cold freezer.
And
so they put all the bodies away so the place doesn't stink.
Yeah. The lights are still on. All the electricity works perfectly fine.
Yeah, at this point, it's early in the apocalypse, but at this point, you're
Yeah.
correct.
The air system. I mean, that would be a big issue too. Just having AC in a place like that, or everything, air system, electric.
With the mall cleaned out, they have access to food, clothes, entertainment. The TV broadcasts have completely ceased, but they have it pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. They had shelter, somewhat of a little fortress. They could get up high on the roofs, so they could be even safe from that advantage.
Yeah, pretty good situation. Except Roger, of course, is getting worse. In one of his final scenes, he promises that he's going to try not to come back, but of course he does, and Peter has to put him down.
Yep.
Fran, who is getting stronger through this process, as we talked about, she learns to fly the helicopter in case anything happens to Steven, which was a smart move on her part.
I actually really like that they did that with this scene. Instead of like when she uses the helicopter later, it's like, how did she randomly figure that out? I like that they took time. Like, listen, we need contingency plan. You've got to learn how to do this just in case. Like, it was really well thought out to put that in.
And it was her idea, again, part of her growth from this demure and weak character to somebody who was certainly going to earn her share of the group.
Yeah.
Here is where a wandering motorcycle gang finds the mall, and they see the chopper on top, and they decide they want in. And one of the main members of the gang is Mr. Tom Savini, with his stylings look very much like his role in Sex Machine and From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah, yeah.
He's like the exact same guy, only
the same, doesn't have the revolver. Yeah.
25, 30 years younger, but he's like the same character with same hair, same mustache, everything, and it's kind of cool.
Well, Tarantino was like, I want that character from Dawn of the Dead.
Yes, I want that guy.
Yeah, because he pulls out the switchblade, but it's a comb, and he goes to comb his hair, and the guy's like, it looks at him funny. He's like, "What? You've never seen one of these?" Like,
and he combs his mustache, and it's
mustache. That's
he's just cool as can be, right?
Yeah.
So they break all the doors, the glass doors, and they enter on their motorcycles. But of course, they allow in a flood of zombies. So the two groups end up engaging, and there's gunfire, and the motorcycle gang they're just destroying stuff. They're just hooligans, and they're just in there for a good time. And
it's almost like a Western where they're just like coming in to raid the town and be crazy. Hey, let's get supplies. Let's see they're just in there messing with stuff. Like in Tombstone, when they come in and just ruin the wedding, like just chaos. Like they're just having fun, laughing about it.
Peter shoots Tom Savini, does a nice flip off one of the upper balconies and crashes. However, Steven gets shot, and then it just carnage basically ensues. There's too many zombies in there now. There's gunfire, and the zombies start just ripping people apart. And this is the scene where you talked about. This is where all the guts and the pulling out the intestines and this is where all the carnage ensues, really.
Yeah, and I thought that was kind of good timing. Like, it wasn't like that right away. Like, at first, like, they're real stupid. You can kind of punch them out of your way. You can kind of move through them. They're kind of just like weeds in the grass. But as the tension builds and it gets more chaotic in the movie, you start to see that with the zombies themselves. Like, it gets more and more serious.
Yeah, and somehow the gang is now all dead or retreated, but the mall is in shambles. The doors are all broke open, and as a safe haven, it is effectively ruined.
Yeah, and through everyone's greed, they've ruined all the resources and protection.
Yep. It was a great situation. Now it works for nobody.
Yeah, they could have all just shared it.
It makes you wonder, like, had the gang put any thought into it, they would have wanted what the other group had, not wanted to destroy it.
Yeah, right. Or if they were smart, they could have just went in there like, hey, we're peaceful, and all 40 of them could have came in, and the 3 people there would have had no choice but to kind of like acclimate,
Right.
Like,
but yeah, they were agents of chaos, not real clear thinking.
Yeah, which means that's probably what they wanted in the first place, right? That maybe that's all they did is go around from town to town, mall to mall, and just destroy stuff.
Yeah. So an injured Steven is trying to make it back to their home base. He gets overrun and he gets bitten and he emerges as a zombie, but he still has the recollection of where to go. So now he's leading a group of zombies towards the storage area where they had set up where they were living.
Yeah.
And at this point, Peter tells Franny to fly off alone, and he ponders killing himself.
He's got the gun to his head as they're coming in. He's just thinking about it. Like, what's the point in this?
Yeah, where are we going? We can't get away from this. But as Franny starts to leave, he changes his mind. He fights and shoots his way up to the roof, and he gets into the chopper as Franny lifts off.
And what I feel is the corniest scene of the entire movie, and I don't know why they did this, and I don't know why they decided to do this, but he does all this karate stuff on his way up there. So he's like literally like doing like jump kicks, like jump double kicks, and like chops and punches. And I'm like, why did they do that?
Yeah,
yeah. I know they're just having fun with the movie, but the movie was serious in tone. And then they throw that.
I agree. There was a couple lighthearted moments, but the tone was very serious.
It's very serious. And then they have this like karate fighting his way to the helicopter, and I was like, what was that?
If you were going to, again, the effects were a little dated, and that's just 45 years of evolution in special effects.
Yeah.
But the punches that the cops threw at the zombies at various points were terrible.
Yes, yeah.
That
the hand-to-hand combat in this movie was just atrocious.
Yes, not what you would watch this movie for sure.
Yeah.
So we have a pregnant Franny and Peter in the helicopter. They have very little fuel and no clear destination. And that's the end of the movie.
Yep. Yeah.
It's not really an uplifting ending. It's not really a positive tone in any way. Really, if you look at the original Romero zombie trilogy, none of them are upbeat.
Right. And they shouldn't be. There's nothing upbeat about it.
Yes. They give glimpses of hope, but it's usually shut down very quickly.
Yeah. She's like, at the end, she's like, well, how much gas do you have? She's like, not. He's like, not. She's like, not a lot. And he's like, okay, then. Like, and they just kind of fly off. Like,
there they go.
Keep it low to the ground if we're not going to be up here long.
And that's, you talk about living day to day or even minute to minute. That's just like, we survived this. Now what? We'll worry about that when we get there.
Yeah, maybe just get to the next place, wherever that's going to be, as long as we can land.
As we mentioned, it's an extremely influential movie that really helped establish the zombie lore and what everyone considers to be, the modern zombie world that Romero created.
Yeah, it's incredible that he created all these rules and all these tropes within. He just created all of it, and to this day, like if you stray from that, like it's like, oh, this person created this new concept. Like, it's almost like this new concept and doesn't work. It's like we've so attached ourselves to this concept that he created, and because it works, it seems like it makes the most sense whenever you're talking about zombies, like the way he did it.
Yeah, and of course the origins of zombies are Haitian voodoo and a completely different. This is a different creature altogether.
Yeah,
and it's interesting in Night of the Living Dead they don't use the word zombie. In Dawn of the Dead, they embrace the word. Yeah,
it is interesting. And another thing I really liked that they did with this movie that I thought was fantastic was they sprinkled in the telecast of the news of what was going on, and you could see the people getting like more and more panicked. Like the one scientist at one point is like rocking back and forth and going like this, and they just keep it logical, Like he's trying to convince himself to keep it logical.
And they've actually moved off set and are kind of like just sitting on steps, and somebody's still got the camera on, and now they're drinking, like any formality to it is completely gone, and it's just more unraveling, like we talked about.
And that movie that came out about 2 years ago, I think, with Leonardo DiCaprio, Don't Look Up. I saw, like, I could see the influences of this movie on that movie, because that movie is a lot of people on the broadcasts for the worldwide like destruction. You can see throughout time they're losing it. They're losing, like you could see in the all the people like in the media, they're losing their minds. And throughout the movie you can see that. And I thought, oh, they must have had the inspiration from this movie from that.
Yeah, it's hard to see a doom and gloom broadcast with scientists without thinking of this movie. But
right, yeah.
We've talked a lot on this movie about our affection for Tom Savini and for Romero, for that matter. I was lucky enough in 1988 to meet Tom Savini in person, and as awesome as he is on screen, he was the most accommodating, welcoming, and genuinely nice person in person as well. And what I brought to have him sign for me was my Betamax cover of Dawn of the Dead,
Wow.
which he signed at the bottom to Jerry from Tom Savini. And I'm not a big souvenir collector,
Right.
but I've had this with me since 1988, and it's
That's
something
incredible.
I plan on getting rid of because
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big souvenir collector either, but there's certain items that are artifacts, and
that's
you
just cool.
That's just cool. Yeah, yeah, I'd have that hung up.
When I had
And it's Betamax too.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
yeah, and as a teenager in the 80s, I had hundreds of Betamax horror movies, of course,
Yeah.
which became worthless, but I
Right,
love
not
them.
that
So
one. Not that one's not worthless.
I don't have the tape, but I have the
Right.
cover.
The cover, yeah, it's framed. That's awesome.
Yeah. All right, well, moving on to our next film in the Massacre at the Mall category. We're going to talk about Chopping Mall from 1986, directed by Jim Wynorski. And this movie is the one thing I think it's right in the middle of the video age. It's right in the middle of the slasher age. The cover and title are misleading to this movie because it makes you think it's just another slasher, and it's not.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I don't know how they decide to come up with that, but when you think of when you see the cover of the VHS and you hear the name, you immediately think, yeah, like a slasher, Chopping Mall.
Yep. Because let's think about the whole movie. Nobody's chopped.
No,
It's just, but
it's more like Robo Security Guard Mall.
it's funny because I thought of that exact parallel because there's some similar themes that are explored in RoboCop.
Yes,
and this does it on a much smaller budget.
a year earlier.
A year earlier, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. We start with a promotional video showing a security robot stopping a jewelry theft, and it's played for the mall shop owners.
Which is the very first RoboCop parallel.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. I watched. I'm like, oh my god, I didn't realize.
I didn't either. Yeah.
I love RoboCop, but this is they borrowed from this heavily.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Park Plaza Mall. It's implementing a computerized security system with metal lockdown doors and 3 robot guards. And I love, the sales rep concludes with nothing could possibly go wrong. And I had to laugh right at that point because that's exactly what you say when everything's going to
go wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is highlighting the naivety of all these characters, right? So that's why it's kind of fun to put that in there.
Yeah,
like they're completely oblivious, because we do that so much. Like we're in that situation right now with artificial intelligence. People are just like, "Oh, AI, cool. It's going to make things easier. What could go wrong?"
Yeah, yeah. This should take care of everything. Sure.
Right.
I saw Terminator. I know how this ends. We cut to the mall is bustling, people all over. Outside, there's a lightning strike. And we know in movies, lightning strikes short circuit the computer and reprogram everything to nefarious ends. We know that's what happens in movies. And this movie is not serious.
From Frankenstein to this. Yeah.
Yes. And when this movie is not serious, this movie, one of the things this does very well is it does not take itself too seriously.
This movie just has fun. And so that's one, as cheesy as the movie is, that's kind of the whole point. They're just having fun making this movie. If
you look at interviews with Jim Wynorski, he knows they were having fun. In fact, he's quoted as saying he tried to cast Kelly Maroney in the lead because he wanted to date her. Yeah. And nobody's taking this too seriously.
And I think he did the voice for the robots. And then, and he also tried to do one of the stunts where he falls off one of the ledges, and he ended up breaking his rib, one of his ribs, and he didn't tell anyone on set until it was all over. So like half the movie, they only took 20 days to film this.
Yeah. It's it's definitely fits that 80s vibe for sure.
And it's the same mall from Commando and Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Interesting. Another
Yep.
film starring Kelly Maroney.
Yep.
We'll
Same mall.
talk about a little more about her later. So the lightning strike, the robots turn on, and in the room with the computer operator, they kill him. And they have like these clamps, and they just use their clamp to grab necks.
Yeah, he slices his neck open or something like that. Yeah.
So later, the next shift operator comes in, but he can't find the guy he's supposed to relieve, and there's no sign of the dead one. And this is part of the humorous part. The robots show intelligent traits, like they're awake and aware, and then like as he turns around, they like shut down real quick, like they're sneaky.
Yeah.
They show they're sneaky bastards, and they show a greater level of intelligence than they should have, which is kind of tongue in cheek.
But the whole thing's fun. Yeah.
They kill this operator as well. And now we cut to our main characters. It's a group of teens. They're planning Go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, these people look like they're in their 30s, but I think like every 80s movie had this. Every time I watch 80s like slasher movies, I'm always like, these aren't teens. Like,
yeah, no, they're not teens, right? Yeah. But they're supposed to be teens or young adults, and they're
21.
Yeah, they're planning a party after hours inside of a furniture store. And there's 4 couples that end up there, and there's drinking and there's dancing, and of course it's the 80s, so there's naked people running around having sex.
Yeah,
it's the 80s after all.
Yeah, that's all people did.
Yeah. There's a janitor outside, and he's alone cleaning up a mess in the looks like the food court, and one of the robot comes up to him, and he drives up and bumps the mop bucket, spilling the pool of water around the janitor.
Yeah.
And then it throws it's got the long tasers on
the line.
Yeah, the taser line, like a police gun.
Mm.
And it just throws the tasers into the water, electrocuting the janitor.
Yeah. And it's this very silly, like, hey, like, I'm mop in here. What are you doing? Like, he's like talking to the robot.
Yeah. Yep. And then the robot utters its catchphrase. It says, "Thank you. Have a nice day."
Yeah. He murders him and then says, and he's polite.
Yeah. And that's like his leftover program where he does that after everyone he murders.
Well, they're also showing intelligence, so it tells you that they have a sense of humor.
They definitely do. Mike leaves the party, and he's got to go get Leslie some cigarettes because, they got cigarette vending machines in the mall still.
Yeah.
And when he's prompted by the robot approaches him. He's prompted for his ID. I stopped and rewound this part and had to. He's like, "Yeah, here it is," and he says, "Klaatu Barada Niktu," and I'm like, "Wait, I know that phrase." So I looked it up, and it's a phrase from 1951's "The Day the Earth Stood Still," and it's a phrase.
Klaatu. Yeah.
It's used to activate a robot in the movie Gort.
Gort, yeah.
And I thought, Mike is the dumb gum chewing meathead of the group.
Yeah.
I thought, what a witty response from the meathead of the group to bring a robot reference from 35 years sooner and throw it at this guy.
That makes the movie infinitely better. I did not know that. I knew he was saying something funny because I rewound it too, and I was like, "What was that?" I didn't bother to look it up, but like I remember scratching my head because I did the same thing. Wow, that's an incredible reference. That the original one's one of my favorite movies of all time. I put it up there, maybe in the top 100. I mean, it's not my favorite, but like it's up there with
the classic.
In the classics. Yeah.
The other thing the reason I recognize it is it's because it's the phrase used in Army of Darkness when Ash is supposed to retrieve the Necronomicon, and he doesn't remember the last word and messes it up
and just says that.
Yeah.
So, that's funny.
That's what I'm like. Well, how could this reference that? Because it predates. It
came out first. Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought that was kind of a cool little.
That's brilliant. I think that's brilliant. Yeah. And that character, he's so unlikable, but it's on purpose. There's that phrase, chewing the scenery, when you're acting over the top. And the
Yeah.
whole time he's chewing gum like really loud, like he's just smirky and snarky. And it's just like you just love to hate him.
He's got the feathered 80s mullet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the robot grabs his throat with its pinchers, and then we cut away.
Mhm.
So Leslie goes looking for Mike because he's not back with her cigarettes, and she doesn't know what happened to him.
Mhm.
And then she finds him with his throat split. And the robot appears and starts chasing her. And this is where we first discover our robots shoot lasers. And they're shooting lasers at her, and
Yeah,
one hits her in the head, and her head explodes.
yeah, which was actually a great scene. I was impressed with for how cheesy the laser beams were. That headshot was really good. I mean, it's
Yeah,
goopy.
it was goopy. Yeah,
Yeah,
very scanners-ish.
the scanners. Yeah, yeah.
The other two robots break into the furniture store, and they start chasing the six remaining teens or young
Hmm.
adults. And they're running around and they're lasering and running over everything in the path, just destroying the furniture store.
Yeah.
And the kids manage to get into a storage room and secure the door. And outside, the steel outer doors come down and lock, meaning it's midnight,
Yep.
meaning they're all trapped
They're
in
they're
until
they're locked
morning.
in there for the rest of the morning. Yeah.
The girls climb up into an air duct, another air duct from just like a previous movie, and
Hmm.
they're looking to find a way out. The robots blast through the door and they start chasing the guys again. And the guys break into Peckinpah's sporting goods store, which I thought was a cool reference to Sam Peckinpah and all of his violent westerns.
Yep.
And they get guns and they start getting all these supplies to fight them. But
Was that actually a real store, or was that made up? Because I remember in the beginning, like you saw like Licorice Pizza, which was a real record like store back in the day. I don't even know if they still have them anymore, but they did show some real stores. So was that a real gun store?
I looked it up and I could not find it
Mm.
in as a real sporting goods store, even in the 80s. I took it as a tongue-in-cheek reference to the director Sam Peckinpah,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it could have been. I just couldn't find it.
yeah.
The guns don't seem to do anything to the robots. They're metal, and they just kind of
Clink,
bounce
clank.
off them.
Yeah.
But they do throw a propane canister and shoot the canister, which explodes and kind of ends up knocking over one of the robots, and you think it's out of commission. Um,
But
but
the explosions were pretty impressive too for the budget they had. I mean, it almost has this like magnesium firecracker look to it. You know what I mean? Because they clearly couldn't burn anything, so I had to use that as like a certain kind of explosive. But
yeah,
for what they did inside that mall, it was the pyrotechnics were impressive.
yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
The girls drop down into an auto parts store, and instead of getting out, one of them gets nervous, and she said she wants to go look for the guys, and they find gas canisters and rags, and they're making like Molotov cocktails out of them. They're
Molotovs,
making
yeah.
little bombs. And again, I'm struck by the diversity and convenience of all these stores that happen to be in the mall that
Yeah.
has everything you'd ever want.
Yeah, yeah. They had the ammo store, the Molotov store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Like a
toppled
video game.
robot manages to come back, gets itself back up on its tracks, and these robots, they don't walk; they run on they're like John Deere robots. They run on
Conveyors. They're like on conveyors.
like a rectangle, or not rectangle, but a triangle
Yeah.
track, like a tractor.
Yeah. Yeah. They actually used to make these. They made 5 of them for the movie, and they used wheelchairs and conveyor belts from treadmills.
No kidding.
Yeah. And they had them
They
on
look pretty
remote,
good.
and they had them on remote controls. Yeah. So they were actually able. Yeah, they did pretty good making them.
Yeah, that's great. The toppled robot, the robot gets back up onto his tracks and comes back on. And now we see one is chasing the girls, and it shoots Susie in the leg with a laser. And she falls down, and then it shoots her gas can that she's carrying, and she's ignited in flames. And again,
Yeah.
another scene where I thought that looked pretty good. Like
Yeah,
she
it
was
was
engulfed in
impressive.
flames, and it looked real.
Mhm.
Um, the boys meet up with the girls, and they lead one of the robots into a trap in an elevator they set. and they drop the elevator car on it, and it crushes and burns and explodes. And we finally think one is actually out of commission. And they decide they're going to set off for the computer control room with the idea of shutting down the robots. At this point, one comes around the corner and gets a hold of Greg and throws him off the top balcony, and he just splats.
Yeah. It's funny how they choose, like he could have just shot him with a laser beam in the head, but he's like, they choose how they're going to kill people. Well, it's just funny that they have that kind of choice, you know, instead of like them just going around shooting. It's like, nope, you're getting thrown. Nope, you're getting a neck slit. Like they can like choose what they're going to do.
And that's very 80s. I actually heard and read stories about movies in the 80s that were made on the basis of somebody came up with 6 or 7 clever kills, and they built a movie around it. So how you killed people was like the defining characteristic of horror in the 80s.
And which is interesting because this movie, I think, was written in 24 hours. Like they in 24 hours, they made the script and they were just like, just go with it, just do it. So yeah, they made this real quick based off of the premise of being in a mall, and the people that like greenlit the movie were like, go.
Yeah.
And then they just made the movie.
Yeah, and these movies made money.
Yeah, they're fun.
The remaining 4, they go into a department store where they set up mannequins to try to throw off and fool the robots. And they manage to short circuit one with an electrical surge, but not before it kills Linda and Rick. So now we only have Allison and Ferdy are left.
The 2 innocent ones, right? The ones that weren't
the 2 nerdy ones.
That
just
least
met
hedonistic.
that night.
Yeah.
Yep. And they were watching an old 50s sci-fi movie where everyone else was drinking and having sex.
Right.
Yeah, there are 2 pure characters.
The virgins, at this point. Right? Yeah, the pure ones. Yeah.
They're still looking for the control room, and they end up getting cornered in one of the storage rooms by one of the robots. And Ferdy shoots it and manages to knock the laser out, which at least eliminates one of their means of attack. And they run out into the hallway, and he picks up a canister, looks like a garbage can or something, and he throws it at the robot, which I don't know what that was supposed to do. But what it does is the robot picks it up and throws it back at him really hard. And it just knocks him to the ground, and he's out cold. So now Allison's kind of alone.
Stupid trash can and just whips it back.
Yeah, just you whatever you're doing, you lost that one.
Yeah.
So she's alone, and she runs into a pet store and hides. And this was a creepy scene to me because there's some things in here I don't like. The robot comes crashing into the pet store, and he's breaking glass tanks, and giant spiders, tarantulas, and snakes are crawling out. And they crawl over the hiding Allison.
Yeah.
And she doesn't flinch, which is, I don't think I could have done that.
Yeah, I don't know how many takes it takes to do that. But luckily, the type of tarantula they use, that type of tarantula, they always use it in movies. And the reason they always use that type in movies, even in like Home Alone, when they have the tarantula, that specific kind of tarantula is the most docile. So
I don't care.
I know, but that's why they use it, because they have to use the most docile thing they can possibly get. It's big, it's scary looking, but it's the most docile one. That's why you'll always see that specific type of tarantula in movies.
It's creepy looking,
yeah,
and snakes are just not my thing. But
yeah,
if I agreed to it, which I never would, you got one take, and if you don't get it, shame on you.
Tarantula's dead
because you're not getting two. But she does it. She stays hidden, and she manages to get away. While she's sneaking away, another animal jumps and startles her. And I think it was a monkey, which, again, this pet store has apparently everything under the sun.
Yeah. I mean, they just went all out. Like when they were pitching this movie, they were like, we need a scene with snakes and tarantulas and monkeys. Like in a mall, they're like, trust me, we'll make a pet store.
Hey, we got auto parts in here. We got guns. We got
Don't
everything.
worry about it. Molotov store. Yeah. There's robots in here.
Yeah. Well, the monkey startles her and she screams. She manages to survive the tarantulas and the snakes, but the monkey just startles her and she screams, drawing the attention of the robot, and it's once again chasing her. At this point, she climbs over one of the railings on the upper levels and she's hanging on to hide. But she's hanging there for too long, loses her grip, and falls.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, she lands on a tent, and she's fine. So she runs into a paint store. Again, what kind of mall is this? Why do they have all these stores?
It's a Sherman-Williams. Yeah.
But she's dumping paint and paint thinner all over the floor. And what is she doing? I didn't get what she was trying to do.
I don't know. Maybe make it slippery so its tracks wouldn't run.
Well, that's exactly what happens. The robot chases her in there, and it's sitting on this, and it's just slipping its wheels. It's lost its traction. And she lights a flare, another thing you could pick up at any mall. She throws a flare into the liquid because of the paint thinner. It blows up.
Yeah.
And
that's like the scene in a movie where they flick the cigarette at a gas, like the gas that's on the floor, and it just blows up.
You see the cigarette turn in slow motion in the air.
Yeah, and immediately just lights. Yeah. In reality, it would just go out and go, it would just fizzle.
Yeah. It blows up. That's it. The final robot is out. Ferdy comes to, and they hug. And again, like I said, it's a misleading title. I understand it was marketed with the title Killbots.
Yeah,
which didn't go over very well.
That was how it released originally as Killbots, and it didn't do well. And they quickly took it off the shelves, and they said, let's rename it. They thought Killbots was too childish and Transformers type thing, and so they just wanted something more vicious. So they came up with Chopping Mall, and then they re-released it and did better.
And again, that's the title is not what it is. Yeah. There's some iffy acting here and there, for sure. Yep. There's some cheesiness, some intentional, some probably not. This will never be confused with high art, but it will also never be confused with boring.
No,
to make a fun movie, and they did.
It's a fun movie. It's only an hour and 15 minutes, so it's not insufferable. It's really fun. They keep that fun electronic music going the whole time, which I'm always a fan of. It's even the electronics. This sounds like it was made with 3 different notes on a little keyboard. But it works. The whole thing just kind of works.
Trying to capture the John Carpenter Halloween magic. A simple score becomes iconic. This movie really made me reflect, and to be honest, I had not seen this before. I watched this for the first time, but it really brought me back to being a teenager in the 80s. And why I think 80s horror was so perfect in my life. The 80s had Fangoria, the magazine, and it was in its peak. And you had that bright color, heavy stock cover with pictures on it that you felt like you shouldn't have. It felt like something secret that no one should know about. So
there's this inclusivity, like you're in on the joke, you're in on it.
Exactly. You're looking at the middle of the careers of George Romero, Tobe Hooper, peak John Carpenter, Wes Craven, David Cronenberg, the rise of Sam Raimi and Stuart Gordon, and trauma films, and the proliferation of home video. So you had the accessibility of horror. You had superstars being made into makeup, Tom Savini, Rob Bottin, Rick Baker, Stan Winston. But to me, the very best thing about the 80s horror was the people who made movies like this and how much they loved and knew who their audience was.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, like you said, you're in that golden era, and there are people just out there having fun with this stuff. Just ridiculous premises and just having a blast making these fun, original movies.
We talked about the star of this movie was Kelly Maroney. She's in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Night of the Comet, The Zero Boys, and of course this feature. And I reached out to her, via her website and sent her an email and told her we were going to be talking about the movie. And of course, she's given interviews ad nauseum about, the experience and the film. So there really wasn't anything new to add. But this is what she wrote me back, and I just wanted to share this. Dear Jerry, thank you for being fans. It's why we get up in the morning. Please tell your listeners how much it means to me that people are still enjoying and having fun with this movie to this day. I can never get over it. Little did I or any of us dream at the time that we'd be talking about Chopping Mall in April of 2023, which is when we had this exchange. knowing that people enjoy your film, work, your offering, and hearing that you made a connection with people like this is the biggest reward we could receive and make everything we go through in our industry worth it. I love you guys so much. Thank you for asking me. It makes me happy for the opportunity to express my thanks. Love, Kelly. Now, she did not need to do that.
No,
right?
no.
That's just amazing. And
That
that's why
is-
people flock to these conventions to meet these people and talk to these people, because they're so damn nice and genuine and appreciative.
Yeah, and it's just down to earth, and just like you said, understood when they made these movies, they understood their audience, and it's just like they've never changed. You know, like they're still those same people. You know, they're just down to earth people who make these fun movies, and that's what makes these movies fun. They're not pretentious. They're not made by pretentious people. And to get a letter like that years later, like that's a genuine response.
Yeah.
You know, you don't get that a lot. When I read that, when you showed it to me, it made me like the movie even more. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's stuff like that. It's why you said it's why people flock to these conventions and still watch these fun movies.
Yeah.
Keep the culture going.
So cool. And we appreciate so much her reaching out and answering like that. It was great.
Yes.
So those are our massacres at the mall, and kind of a fun category, and certainly a different dynamic from the seriousness of Dawn of the Dead to the fun shopping mall. But
which is the fun part about it, that you can have a serious film. You can take one genre and do two completely different things, which I think from episode to episode, I think we find that a lot. We find that one genre can take it in two different ways radically.
That's what I really actually enjoy about this format is you take a connecting category like mall and end up with such diverse films that really, give you different perspectives, which is awesome. Well, that is our show for this week. Next week, we're going to be talking about Mother's Day, and we're going to feature some mothers in our films that we review, and that's going to be very interesting as well. I think we're going to kind of hit some of that same vast differences in what we talk about next week.
Yeah, very much so. It's gonna be dynamic, and there's a lot of layers to these kinds of movies, and it's gonna be fun to explore them.
Absolutely. Well, we thank you as always for listening. This is the Weekly Horoscope. I'm Jerry. That's Matt, and we will see you next time. Thanks again.
All right, thanks everyone. Thank you, Jerry.
Your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.